Welcome everyone. My name is Fatma Said. I'm the co-founder of eWave. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to join this digital event. In recent weeks, we've had so many brands and organizations reach out to us to ask, what are others doing, what's working and what isn't, and if there's anything that they should be considering that they aren't necessarily thinking of. So we thought about putting together this digital session for you guys, and we're very fortunate to have an amazing panel here with us today to share some of these insights with the broader community. We've had over 250 registrations, so clearly showing how much value this can bring by pulling the community together and sharing experiences in this really critical time. So I'm super excited about this session, and I'm sure you'll all get a lot out of it too. So I know our lives have been really turned upside down in the last couple of months. I know mine's been busier than ever, even though I barely left the house in the last 5 weeks. So before I introduce our panelists, just a couple of housekeeping items for you guys. One, we'll be recording this session and the recording will be sent out afterwards. There was quite a few people who couldn't make the time, but we're really keen. So we'll make sure we get this to them. And also we'll be asking for your feedback at the end of this session. So it'd be great if we can get your input. It will help us make these sessions better in the future. We'll keep you all informed of any future events. So please feel free to pass on the registration emails to any of your colleagues who you think might benefit from attending. If you want to ask any questions to our panelists, there is a little Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. You can type the question in there, and what we'll do is we'll try to cover that in the Q&A section of this session towards the end. And lastly, if you've got any issues during this webinar, please type it into the chat box and one of the team will try to assist you. As I mentioned before, our lives have really been turned upside down. And as we continue to find different ways of working, which I believe will stay with us in one way, shape or form, even past this pandemic, and they will actually create our new normal. And that's why we're all here today, to learn from each other and also to secure our business's futures and our staff's futures as well. Personally, for me and for eWave, everything I and my leadership team have been focused on over the last few weeks was really the health and safety of our team, and also to sustain as many jobs as possible. This isn't just eWave specific, but also for our clients, and by working with them to come to mutual agreements in order to support and sustain operations for as many businesses as possible. I'm a firm believer that if we stick together during this time, we will come out of it much stronger, and how each and every one of us behaves and treats others in this crisis is what will define our relationships well into the future. In the last few weeks, we've seen so many hard times. Social distancing rules, increased restrictions have caused a dramatic fall in foot traffic, leading to businesses closing brick and mortar stores, some for the last time. Thousands of staff have been laid off or stood down indefinitely. Others are on unpaid leave or part-time hours. And it's not only the storefronts that are impacted, but also the supply chain that's challenged, with movement of goods internationally and even around the country slowing down and becoming more challenging. But where there is challenges, there's also always opportunity. So in recent weeks, we've seen so many great transformations in the digital space. Retailers have really risen to the challenge of turning into a pure play overnight. And businesses are reimagining the way they connect with their customers. And as a result, they're increasing their digital sales fourfold and even more. One of my personal takeaways out of this crisis time definitely is the speed of decision making. In decisions that used to take weeks and months going back and forth in discussions and now been made overnight. And I can't help but ask myself, how can we actually take this momentum into the new post-COVID world? So with that, I want to introduce the two panelists for today. So welcome to Stuart Freer, Chief Digital Officer at Mecca, and also Mark Tepperson, Chief Digital Officer at Accent Group, and 2020 Retail Insiders #1 in e-commerce. Thank you both so much for joining and sharing your wisdom with us. We're going to hear from both of our panelists today, but why don't I jump over to Stuart first. Stuart, if you could take 10-15 minutes and just explain what's happening in your world, in your business, in the industry, and how you've actually navigated this really challenging time. And I'll follow up with questions before we jump over to Mark.
Yeah, thanks, Fatima. Like, it's a pleasure to be here, so thank you for asking me to join. And also, really pleased to be the warm-up act for Mark a little bit later on. So, Mark, I'm going to do my best to try and warm everybody up a bit for you and try and not be boring. So, let's see how we get on. Look, my background, you know, I'm as old as I look. I've been around technology for 22 years. As you can tell by my accent, I am from the UK. And I've been in Australia for 7. My background is predominantly in food, where I've worked with Tesco, Walmart, and then Coles, and then in non-food, where I've worked with George Clothing in the UK, Dixon's Retail, and Home Retail Group. So varied across retailers, varied across e-commerce players. You know, been through different crises over the years, as you do when you get to my age. So, you know, I've been through the GFC in the UK, which is as extreme as it comes, and you know, the mentality of fighting to keep the customer and keep things going. And to be honest, this crisis is not too dissimilar to that, except extremely accelerated in terms of what that has meant for business. And, you know, for businesses like the business that Mark and I work in, you know, where you have to move from a position of having a highly experiential service where you've got, you know, people in stores providing that service to customers, to then shutting the store doors and then working with our e-commerce business unit and the partners across our business to then drive those sales to maintain a level of business that will hopefully keep our doors open for the future. Whilst not having absolute clarity over what this strange virus is that has come and landed on our shores, probably, I think the earliest was early February. I think in my notes I took, I think 17th of February, there was 22 cases in Australia. And then the government really escalating its information, its medical advice, and having to then work out how do we keep our team members safe, and then how do we keep our customers safe too. And navigating through that with information changing rapidly on a daily basis has been one of the most extreme examples of working agile that I think I have ever seen. You are getting snippets of information, you're making super fast decisions, you are implementing them the next day, you are then fixing the things that you broke, trying to help the team not break and yourself not break and your leadership team as well, and dealing then with all of the changes that brings about, such as closing stores, closing offices, large groups of people working from home, and scaling that to support the business and to train some people who have never used these tools before. So I think it's been an unbelievable change. I did write a little bit of a blog where I described it as a portal to the future now. I think my words were, we've just done 5 years change in 5 to 7 weeks. And that's not unique to Mecca. That's, you know, certainly the case of Mark's business and what they've been doing, and others that we've spoken to and heard from. But also recognizing and trying to think about what does it look like through the transition phase of this, which we're probably starting to head towards in maybe the next 4 to 6 weeks, and then post-COVID world, which is likely to be 6 to 12 months. So what does that mean for business and therefore the share of online versus what would be traditional bricks and mortar? So it's been a a monster 8-9 weeks, in fact, because I think a lot of us have really started looking at this and leaning into this mid to early February. I think it was kind of, unfortunately, Valentine's Day when we all started to get aware of this. And then I think shortly after that, we're all taking medical advice from various different groups in government and industry, and all trying to share information and navigate through this. And across industry, the collaboration has been extremely, extremely good, with people sharing information and trying to help each other get through this. You know, the competitive piece is almost stepped aside just to navigate to the next point in time. So that's kind of my my take on it. Fatima, I just wondering what you were thinking you wanted me to kind of touch on next.
Yeah, I think you touched on this kind of seismic shift in behavior, both internally and externally. How have you guys responded to that? What are some of the changes that you've made in recent weeks that are just something you wouldn't necessarily even have thought of a month prior?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is the way that the teams, across the business, in technology, and particularly in our fulfillment centres, have had to pivot from what they were doing at pace before to now doing at extreme pace, but also doing it from home. Some people have. It's quite funny. My head of dev's a fabulous guy. He had to kind of go and hide in his bathroom to work to get some quiet time because his kids were running around and his wife was trying to learn over here. And all those things come about as part of this. So people have taken on extraordinary challenges to pivot. And you talk about the volumes, and I'm not going to go into say where we are, but when we've had to switch on our distribution centre to work 24 hours a day for at least 5 days a week to manage through the volumes, switch off New Zealand as the New Zealand business had to, one, shut down its stores, shut down its CFC, switch the CFC on in under 12 hours in Australia, migrate the orders across, roll out additional packing facilities, and switch on additional international shipping facilities, because that's what we're doing. In that same period of time, it's the most extraordinary level of effort and engineering that I've seen in my 20-year history of software engineering teams. And they've done that without any complaint. I mean, I won't say they've not come out of it frazzled, a little bit burnt out, needing a reset, and things are starting to steady. And excuse me, I'm sure Mark will say that, but they have responded in incredible ways. But then to enable the systems to handle those volumes that we are seeing that have moved from stores to e-com is nothing short of a miracle.
So talk to me a little bit about the team. You've kind of mentioned how they've had to start responding really quickly in new environments. And I know we've all, that's one of the plus sides of this whole situation. For me, at least, is I've met so many of my team's families and children that pop into the videos every now and again. But it's a challenging new world that we all have to come to terms with. How do you keep your team motivated? And where do you kind of feel that they're at in these phases, which seems to be a lot of up and down over the weeks?
Look, I'll be clear. I would say I haven't done the best job of it recently. It has been incredibly tough because of the changing dynamics of the business, moving around, managing the day-to-day situations while we're having to, switch off stores, manage that, switch off DCs, stand down team members. And then in particular, I've got a software engineering team that is making all of this change to enable this to happen. I've got a rapidly scaled down service delivery team that's got to keep now a DC running 24/7 that was only running during the day, and they're on much smaller numbers, whilst having a major program running as well in the background, trying to protect them from everything else that's going on so they can keep focused, but not having them feel isolated. And that I have to be frank, is super tricky. And, we're kind of coming out of that now. And, I think there's a little bit of kind of reconnecting that needs to be done in a different way that is a normal, on a video, on a one-to-one or a team meeting. So I think it's I think people are doing really well, but I think, you know, as leaders, it's been an extraordinary change in what we're used to doing to support our teams. Because in my lifetime, I've never seen this, and I pretty much guarantee everybody on this call has never seen anything that's remotely similar. And so the expectations on you as a leader are very, very different, and we're making mistakes and we're figuring our way through that.
What are some of the things that you found are working well with the team in particular?
I think the focus they have, because the lack of distraction has been really, really good. So instead of having a plethora of projects, trying to manage the sequence and prioritization of those, it's been really good just to say everything there has stopped. This is the first priority, this is second, this is third, and nothing will appear until we've done those and they've landed. And that absolute critical kind of agile single piece flow thinking is made a difference, particularly with some of the developments. We're still not perfect, a long way from that, because we still have, you know, people wanting to do lots and lots and lots of things at once, which then causes distraction and, you know, multitasking, which we know is better in one side of the demographic than the other. And so we need to kind of balance that out with delivering fast, but not having too many things come into the team for them to think about.
Very good. And so when you spoke about the speed at which you actually had to make decisions, but also technological changes, just to keep the operations running, as kind of New Zealand was shutting down at a different pace and Australia was releasing new rules and restrictions every couple of days. But Mecca as a business has also innovated quite a bit in this period and experimented with some new forms of connecting with the customer. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think as a business, we were quite lucky that some of those things were slightly in play already and there were discussions about them. And I think what it's done is it's taken a project that might have taken us a number of weeks through thinking about the process, how it might work, how it's going to impact, to just get it in and we'll figure it out. So I think that's been a super positive outcome from this in terms of really pushing the kind of test and learn mentality. But to your point, I mean, if you think about just the situation of a business going, we're going to have to close our shops because we can't maintain social distance. And then you start to look at that and go, oh, hang on. So if we close all the shops, how do we maintain looking after our people? So what do we need to do to then drive our e-commerce business to then maintain this group of people across our business? And you start looking at choices and scenarios, and they're not pleasant. They're reminding me of the GFC when you're having to take some drastic cuts or temporary cuts to stand down people, and it's not a nice thing to do. And then, you know, we're in Sunday evening, and then Sunday night the JobKeeper gets announced, and it's like, oh, whew. You know, right, okay, we've got a glimmer of hope here. We've got this opportunity to support broader teams and numbers of people. So what does that look like? And then the information starts to come out, but it's sketchy still. And so you're navigating with not a lot of information and trying to make really quick decisions and making good decisions, but making some really bad ones as well. And that's I think that's the key thing about you know, this situation. At the same time, you're then switching off New Zealand, you're switching on Australia, you're introducing Mecca Live, you're introducing Mecca Virtual Chat, we're expediting orders through carriers, we're switching on 2 extra shifts at the DC, all these things. And it just makes it very, very busy for the teams. And therefore, we then have to go, right, this is the order we're doing it in.
And some of the things I've seen is how you've actually leveraged, despite the store closures, is the ability to still continue kind of one-on-one appointments over FaceTime and booking apps. How is that going?
Yeah, so that's interesting. That's very, very new. Maria, our head of retail, and her team have been kind of championing that process. The IT dev, e-com teams have built all of the experience online to make that happen, and that's going really well. Actually, it's growing at a really rapid rate. And it really grows depending on how many stores you can put it into, and how many team members you can have under social distancing rules. but there'll be a natural limit. So at the moment, it's very much a test and learn for us, on top of things like, call and collect and opening a few stores gradually, just to first of all, see how we can manage it from a health and safety point of view with our team members, because one, we have to put their needs first and how they can feel and how they manage in stores. And then secondly, how do we look after our customers through this phase? And then ultimately, what's the customer sentiment behind it? So, there's some really difficult challenges, because I think on the outside, people will say, oh, just open stores. People want the stores open. But then there are some elements that we need to really think about very, very closely and carefully.
That's very true. And I think, sometimes we can underestimate what it actually means to be able to safely follow all of these rules and make sure that our staff is safe, but also the customers at the same point in time. What do you think, from all these changes that we're seeing and this kind of enormous shift into the digital world, what will stay with us? And I know this is very speculative post this period.
Yeah, I think there's a set of behaviours which I really hope stay. I think people have become almost so survival based around what the customer needs and how we deliver things quickly, that I think that has to stay. Because we, as businesses, lots of business are guilty of, they can think and talk and try and work through a problem too much. And sometimes you can just test the idea and get far more insight more quickly. Excuse me. And I think that's certainly what I've noticed across the ones and the friends in different retailers I've spoken to. So I'd love to see that behaviour maintained. In terms of what I don't know. I don't know the answers. And I was on a KPMG call yesterday, and they said that they think between 10 and 25% of stores won't reopen as a footprint. I mean, that could be quite realistic. I think there might be a view that through the transition phase of this, it'd be a 50-50 between stores and retail, stores and online. If we can open stores fully and the social distancing, and how stores will reduce in income and online will grow. But I would imagine that, if businesses were sitting between 10 and 15% online, they'll probably see 30% as their outturn going forward. And the ones that had a good online experience are the ones making, are really getting the benefit of this situation. The ones that had a small, negligible online sales platform, I would imagine have seen very, very little benefit. So if you were trading pretty strongly before, you'll have seen a big uplift. If you had very little in terms of online, I'd imagine you've seen very little.
I think you're right, and it kind of echoes the sentiment that I've certainly heard in recent discussions around some of those numbers and predictions. So look, we're yet to see what will turn out, but that's certainly some of the trends that we're seeing. So thank you so much for these insights, Stuart. I'll come back to you with some more questions. I'd now like to go to Mark. Thank you for joining us on this panel. Tell us a little bit about your story, Mark, how you've been navigating the current challenges, and what opportunities have you actually found in the midst of this? Over to you.
Sure. So I think both you and Stuart have highlighted some very similar challenges that we've all kind of been contesting with as COVID-19 hit, and we were all making adjustments to how we were going to operate. Again, not too dissimilar to what you guys have shared. In the first few weeks, probably commencing in March, things started obviously heating up very quickly. There was a lot of fear and concern around health and safety of team and customers. And we obviously made a decision to close our entire network, both across Australia and New Zealand, of just over 500 stores towards the end of March. The operating cadence and just dealing with those kind of challenges, no one, in all of your scenario plans, I don't think anybody had ever contemplated what a business would look like if you had to close all of your stores. And so, we were doing things for the very first time, learning on the run. in a very challenging environment. There was a lot of uncertainty around how hard the government was going to go on the restrictions. Customers had abandoned shopping centres in droves, largely out of the fear and also some of the concerns and the direction that was given by the government. And so, navigating our way through that occupied a huge amount of our time and discussion. In the first several weeks of the crisis in March, I suppose as we made that decision to shut down our stores and sadly having to stand down close to 4,500 team members through the process, we had to shift our attention very quickly to how do we right-size the business, how do we operationalize ourselves during this period of time. And quite simply, while the stores were in hibernation, there were three kind of key focus areas. The first one being, how do we reduce our stock on hand? Because as distributors of brands, and we purchase lots of product as well, having stores closed and not able to metabolize product, we had a flow that we needed to address. We had to work very closely with our partners to do that. And we really lent into with each other to kind of get through this period of time. The second one was really around eliminating and reducing as much costs that we could with stores not operating and no income. I mean, that's a clear thing that you've really got to tackle. So it was really looking at what are the business critical elements that we have to maintain, what are the things that we can freeze or hibernate, and talking again with partners around how we do those things. And then the third thing was around how do we generate cash and revenue, and that was where we really leaned into our digital muscle. We were quite, what I'm sharing is what's publicly available, so we put out an announcement to the market earlier this week, but kind of setting ourselves a goal of wanting to be able to achieve more than $1 million a day in digital, which was some 4 times what we had been doing previously, really shifted the momentum. Thanks to the crisis, we became a direct-to-consumer pure play overnight. And that's not an operating cadence that we were familiar with. We run a brilliant omnichannel setup. We have, very well-established processes and procedures around how to run that. But when your entire focus becomes around that direct-to-consumer piece, there was a lot of new learnings and shifts that we needed to drive. So I'm incredibly proud of how the organization's kind of stepped up. Everyone's had to learn, new skills, and, Stuart touched on this kind of agile thinking and methodology. And I think that kind of naturally found, I suppose water found its mark in terms of that ruthless prioritization and moving through things at a very rapid pace. But it really did take some very strong coordination from right across the business. So whilst all of our stores were closed, I mean, traditionally we would be fulfilling at any given time, probably somewhere between 50 and 70% of all of our digital fulfillment comes from our stores pre-COVID-19. So, I mean, I very publicly shared for a long time, what I believe to be the key ingredients to a successful omnichannel business, and that's rethinking how you utilize, your assets, and stores is a key part of that. So we were fortunate insofar that we had the infrastructure already set up to use stores as distribution centers, which certainly helped to disperse the load of the additional orders that we were getting. But we had to create a safe environment for our teams to return back to. So in the first few weeks after the stores had closed to the public, we were operating a small number of stores as dark stores, so closed to the public, where one team member would be in there each day picking and packing orders. Our operations team, supply chain logistics, making sure that the courier pickups were being scheduled. And our customer experience team, had to scale up during this period to kind of deal with the excess demand. And over the course of the last few weeks, we've been progressively opening more and more of those dark stores. And we're virtually, almost at the point now where we've got all stores, all of our 450 stores in Australia and the 50 odd stores in New Zealand now operating as dark stores within the guidelines of the government in terms of, social distancing and restrictions. So that's given us enormous bandwidth to be able to increase the throughput of the digital piece. And then I think our strategy was really about, how do we, where is the opportunity in this kind of crisis point so that we can maximize, I suppose, what we had available to us. And so I think very boldly, we decided to move into television for a number of our brands to get just broad awareness out. A number of brands, around Australia in almost every category have abandoned the advertising markets. And it seemed like a good opportunity for us at the time. So with Skechers, Athlete's Foot, we went with those brands first. It lent into the trend of not only working from home, but exercising from home. And then on Sunday, for the very first time in the brand's history, we took Platypus to television and had a terrific response. So I suppose really trying to seek out the opportunity, the blue ocean. And I think in any crisis, the way to navigate out is to really seek out and to the best of your ability, maximize those opportunities where they presented. So it's been a huge effort from right across the business. Every function has played its role in making this happen.
It's interesting how you talk about, actually leveraging some of the more traditional marketing and advertising channels when, everybody's kind of thinking about just new things in this new world. Sometimes you can just go back to the old ways in this crisis and actually leverage some really good results.
I think what we learned from the sneaker business is retro trends, right? So what's old is new again. And not too dissimilar in this market. And that's not to say that we haven't lent very heavily into digital and social marketing during this period of time. But when we think about the funnel, how do you radically increase broad market awareness of your brand? The ability to cut through in a market like this is fairly unprecedented because there isn't a lot of other noise going on. And in fact, it's probably seen to be one of the few uplifting, good news, feel-good stories or messages. And so customers, I think, naturally gravitate towards that where they can. I think in this environment as well is that, whilst we have a large business, we're the largest footwear retailer in Australia and New Zealand, we still have millions of customers that have never purchased online before. And so, through this period, it's a real opportunity to introduce them to another way of engaging with our brand and our business. If you look at all the previous research that says a customer that purchases both across your in-store and your online touch points is a stickier customer. They return more frequently, they spend more money with you. However retail returns in terms of to what sense of previous trade that looks like, if we've been able to convert some of our existing store customers to online customers during this period of time, the net result hopefully is that we can, establish and build and grow our market share and hopefully solidify that into the future.
I mean, definitely everybody's kind of gotten used to buying pretty much everything online in these recent weeks, even if you've always resisted that, even in demographics where we wouldn't normally see that. There's been tremendous growth, and the question really is how much of that is going to stay with us. So if you kind of look at the trends within your business and see, what was digital pre-COVID, and from that going to, almost being 100% of the business during store closures, where do you think it will go, and what does this transition phase look like?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I kind of reflect on a few points. I think Stuart made some really good um, observations about, the reset points. If your business was kind of 10 or 15% before COVID, and it may well end up being double that at a normalized level going afterwards. But if you look at it more broadly and just think about the bigger picture here, I kind of think about this moment in time as being the tipping point, particularly for online retail. And if you just think about that in the context of other industries, right, like the music industry, when when iTunes came out, I mean, Napster broke ground, but iTunes kind of codified it and formalized it. If you think about even the smartphone, when that first launched, it was, very limited adoption, but it reaches its tipping point and then it becomes the norm. And then if I think to Uber, right, it took Uber 5 years to book 1 billion trips and then 6 months to book its second billionth trip. There is a tipping point and a natural acceleration to adoption curves that have ripped through many industries. This may be, online's moment in terms of how that transforms the landscape for forever. I think, customers have been given a period of time where they haven't had the option in many cases to go and visit, malls or stores. They've had to make purchases online in order to get the things that they're after. And for those brands, to Stuart's point earlier, for those brands that have been able to deliver a great experience during this period of time, much like the first time you ever took an Uber and vowed you'd never get in a taxi again, there may well be many customers that feel that way about online purchasing, that it's not as scary as they thought it was before, that it is convenient, that it gives me time to do the things that I've really enjoyed over this period, like spending time with family or getting out and about and exercising. And so that may well change the baseline of behaviour. But I still do believe that there is an important role for stores to play. I don't think that, stores are going to disappear off the face of the earth. They're an important part of the overall ecosystem. I think the key thing is, in this new trading environment with, a reset level of online as a percentage of the total mix, and then the store sales in terms of comp numbers, what they actually return back to, there will need to be a reset in the market about, the overall commercials and the dynamics around how that proposition stacks up, because on previous kind of fundamentals, that equation no longer works. And again, we've been quite public this week around, wanting to work very collaboratively with our landlords to be able to achieve that, because we believe, just as they do, I suppose, in, the importance of having a healthy ecosystem, but it's got to work.
The old model, Mark, is dead when it comes to landlords and leases and how it's been working to date?
I certainly think with the uncertainty that's ahead of us, the previous models are being challenged and don't work as well as they were originally designed. So in a period of uncertainty, particularly around what the trading environment is going to look like, and if you look at markets like China, who are far more ahead of the curve than what we are in terms of their timeline dealing with COVID, in the first 4 to 6 weeks after they reopened, the stores reopened, foot traffic only returns to 40 or 50% of its previous levels. So there's a huge amount of risk for retailers reopening their stores, particularly where there is not the same ability to share, I suppose, in that risk with landlords. So there is an imperative to work closely together to navigate our way through this. If we can't, we simply have to just rebalance the mechanisms so that proportionately we are sharing in the downside, and if the upside is there, the upside too. But if we can't get that balance, it's going to be very difficult for many retailers to reopen their doors.
I think, it's definitely going to redefine the way we do business. both with our customers and with our suppliers. So it will take new approaches. It will take rethinking, everything that's kind of been established over the last however many decades, and letting go of those things and just thinking about the new ways that could actually be mutually beneficial, I think, on both ends.
Absolutely.
Now, I just want to remind the audience, guys, you can ask questions to any of the panelists. We've got a couple here, so I'll read them out. But if there's any, please press the Q&A box at the bottom. I'd love for Stuart to come and weigh in on these as well for the last 20 minutes of this chat. So there's a question around, Mark, what you spoke about in terms of introducing traditional marketing for Platypus. With consumers in lockdown, they have exposed themselves to new avenues across e-com platforms, and their purchasing habits and influencing touch points have changed. How will you navigate your way to recapture and remain relevant with these consumers in the new norm?
My analogy of taking that brand to television was a moment in time where we decided to be bold and take a chance. I suppose we'd been debating, again, Stuart touched on a lot of these things, we didn't magically come up with them in the 5 minutes after COVID-19 kind of happened. I mean, a lot of these discussions were already in the wings. We focused ourselves and accelerated them where we thought there was opportunity. So for Platypus, it was really about the fact that there was a great opportunity to cut through. We fundamentally believe that the way that we engage with those customers and what we are known for is, one of the key reasons to our success. It's why landlords want us in their malls. It's why customers flock to us online. We create an experience for customers, however they choose to shop with us, that they really value. In this market and in this climate where you can get cut through in different channels, be it traditional forms or the digital, platforms or digital marketing, all of those same principles still apply. I mean, I think we should be very careful to kind of chuck the baby out with the bathwater here and saying that, everything that we did before is broken and no longer relevant. I think it's just about being very considered about what we were doing previously do we want to continue on with. And particularly where you can really measure the impact of things, so return on ad spend, looking at those investments, there is opportunity out there for those willing to seek it out. You've just got to find it.
And what about the way back, Stuart? What is the plan in terms of actually, coming back to a new normal?
Yeah, I think it comes back to what normal is. I think we're all trying to figure out what that is at the moment. And there's a raft of retailers that are opening stores as of the 11th. I mean, Mecca's got a few stores open at the moment as part of a sort of call and collect, which is more of a, just a general kind of gentle approach to see, customer sentiment, how they feel. If we can put the measures in place that are going to keep our team members and our customers safe, and that will allow us to then, I think, guide ourselves to what levels of trade we expect to see those stores to get, and whether or not, and this is just a big open question, and based on what I was reading and talking about yesterday, was whether or not 10 to 25% of stores, close in general retail or not. So I think people are trying to, we're specifically trying to navigate through what does the future look like? What things do we need to stop doing right now that may not be as relevant in a post-COVID world? So, for example, we might be pulling back on some of the store rollout plan, for example, which I think a lot of retailers would be considering. But more importantly, what are the things that we need to accelerate so that we take full, take the full opportunity that is presented to us, and that opportunity being how we are going quicker as a business, how we are making those decisions more quickly, and almost that Amazon-like way that everybody talks around, small 2-pizza teams, writing PR documents for your idea, testing it quickly and doing it. everybody's done that, but much faster at the moment. So you then ask the question of, well, how do we maintain it? And I'd love that to be the new norm, but I think I also have to think about the welfare of teams and, you know, how hard they've been working to make that the norm, because they've worked super hard. I can't say that enough.
And what is your path back, Mark, as it stands right now?
You know, I think there's some very similar elements to what Stuart's touched on. So we do have the ambition to try and stand up as many stores back to the public as we can. We're still working very closely with our landlords around how we do that. There's been a massive effort around standing up the social distancing guidelines for in-store. We've had, sanitization packs pulled together, in-store signage, mapping all of that. And so that work and effort and retraining the team around, you know, selling shoes as selling makeup is, it's a very close contact kind of environment. We've had to rethink how we do those things. So there is there's an enormous amount of change that is required in order to just get back to where we were, to recommence what we were doing previously. We don't underestimate that effort either, and we're learning on the go.
Yeah, that's a great point, actually, Mark. You know, the fact that we run services in our stores for skin and makeup treatments, the fact that we run testers and samples in stores, which are all things that drive sales because of the experience, because the ability to take pieces home of product and try it before you actually buy it, are things that got completely taken away as part of COVID because of health and safety and social distancing. So some of the things that we've both had to do, and that our businesses have done in the virtual world, is literally how do we take that business model and keep it going without putting customers and team members at risk? And that's what things like virtual host has been, particularly for us. And I think the retail team have done an amazing job of pulling that out of nothing.
That actually leads to an audience question we've got, and maybe Stuart, if you continue on from here. The people are wondering, what technologies have you reviewed or trialed to help drive a more positive online experience and to help connect customers to staff? Like this idea with FaceTime, like how are you actually doing it and what technologies are helping you?
Yeah, if I can go first, Mark, just quickly. I won't go into what technologies we're looking at, because obviously that's a commercial piece, but in terms of our existing web platform, which is Salesforce, our existing back-end systems and platforms, which largely run on, which in fact all do run on AWS these days, and our existing booking services platform have all been leveraged to enable that new journey to come to life. And then we have simply used FaceTime. We have simply deployed phones to stores and asked customers for their numbers, and we have contacted them via FaceTime, all that means. So in a classic kind of Mecca and COVID style, it's sort of fake it till you make it style technology.
Brilliant. And Mark, what about you?
I mean, I think much the same as Stuart. We've leveraged our core platforms during this period of time. The reality is that in a very tight window, we're talking about the best part of the last 5 or 6 weeks. Large scale, rollouts of new technology and platform is really not all that feasible, right? So you're tuning what you've got and trying to squeeze as much out of it. I mean, similar to Stuart, our CX team have done a remarkable job of standing up say the virtual selling component. So standing up a sales team, utilizing existing platforms, Zendesk and live chat and a whole bunch of others that have helped to generate and kick that along. And I think during this period, what it does probably highlight is where there is additional opportunity to kind of lean in and leverage, and certainly surveying a number of different technologies to be able to scale that, post kind of coming out of this in the next couple of weeks and months.
I think there really was no time to really think about any new technologies. So it's doubling down on what you've got, making the most of it, also becoming creative of just leveraging available technology like FaceTime and maybe it's not perfect, but it works, and you can get going with something and test the market before you actually invest in a longer term solution.
Yeah, I mean, that's spot on, and Mark is dead right on this, that going through a commercial process to select the technology that you've got to live with beyond this, it is almost unfeasible in this phase. But where you are working with cloud providers already, Amazon, Azure, whoever, you've got the ability to try components that they have, on daily cycles or even for hours of the day. So that gives you that ability to try some of these things out. And that's I think what most businesses have done. They've just done the things they wanted to do, but at an incredible pace.
A question on marketing content. I know Mark already spoke about the actual channels. Stuart, have you adjusted the actual content to this new environment, and what are the business's thoughts around this?
Yeah, so our marketing teams and our creative teams have done an amazing job in terms of really focusing the customers in terms of some of that kind of wellness and well-being, particularly in terms of what's been going out across some of the social. In terms of what's then going out as email has been really focused on your own health and safety, but also how we can then continue to support you through these times, as well as some of the philanthropic, I'll put the teeth back in, but the philanthropic areas that, Mecca has supported to, help some of the frontline staff as well. So, I think just going in here's what we can do for you to grab more sales, I think feels a little bit kind of disingenuous in a period where there's a lot of people struggling and suffering, but then going over here and saying, actually, we're helping the frontline people. We've taken medical grade sanitizer or product that is of medical grade out of our distribution center and just sent it to all of our team members to keep them safe, as well as other measures that our founders have put in place. I think is just more important in terms of the message. Have the channels changed? No, not at all. We haven't leveraged TV. Excuse me. I don't think it's something we'll do in terms of traditional TV. In terms of online media, Mecca lifestyle stuff, yes, absolutely. In terms of how we've communicated to team members, is a kind of another level of this. Is we have gone from what would be normal Monday morning meetings with several hundred people standing up listening to our founders and retail, through to it being done via Teams or via stream, and all communications to stores being done via stream, or in some cases through a local production studio, to really bring to life what's going on and trying to help them through this, but also trying to tell them and explain to them about JobKeeper, which hasn't been the easiest.
I think we're all finding that there's just a lot of information out there and a lot of confusion as well. So kind of bringing that down to what really matters and communicating the right thing to your teams and your customers is a whole piece of work within itself. Mark, an interesting question from the audience. With the shift towards e-commerce as a channel and the inevitable swing back to in-store experience at some stage, is there going to be a focus moving forward to create a true omnichannel customer experience and to connect offline and online even further and more seamlessly?
I mean, that's been our ambition for a very long time. I think the achievement of a true seamless, I mean, I don't think it'll ever be, seamless. I mean, I think we use words like, and maybe that's just a different word meaning the same thing, but you want it to be more fluid than what it is. So you're trying to eliminate as many of those kind of friction points for the customer. That is a long-standing ambition. Do we want to accelerate that? Absolutely. I think, given the extraordinary lift in the digital business over this period of time, the question kind of remains is not only what does the new normal look like in terms of its rebalanced levels, but we've just proven to ourselves how big our digital business could be. Now, it was, a little bit of circumstances out of our control that has led to the rapid growth, but that's not to say that those levels can't be achieved on an ongoing basis. I think in the new world, what we need to redefine, and I've spoken about this several times in the course of the last few months, is redefining the role of the store. I think it still has an incredibly important role to play, but I think it's more than what it was before. I've spoken about the store as the distribution center, but I think the store becomes the lab. I think the store becomes that physical experience center that it was before, which is going to, for those retailers that remain, maybe with fewer stores, we'll have to really ramp up that experience in store to win people back and to make sure that that is a great experience. But we absolutely want to tie those two worlds together as close as we possibly can.
And how do you think it will be different in the post world? Like, do you see like a lot of movement to more contactless payment, no more cash? Like, what are some of those changes that you're contemplating in the physical world as things come back?
I think those things will naturally find their course. I mean, over the last 5 years, we've seen a decline in the amount of cash that we are seeing in stores. Does this accelerate that trend? Perhaps. I don't think we'll ever get to the stage where we'll stop accepting money from customers that want to buy shoes, however they want to pay for them. But I think times like these do accelerate things, perhaps, and so that is a good example, perhaps, of something that we might see a shift in trend towards.
Fantastic. And then what are your businesses doing? Stuart, maybe if you could kick off here, to actually reinstate confidence into the consumer in this post-COVID world. And as you're kind of preparing, we have to be ready for anything. Potentially there could be a second wave. I know Mark spoke about, the hygiene and distancing rules that they're putting together for the stores. What are some of the plans? What are you guys doing to help reinstill confidence?
Yeah, I mean, across our distribution centre, across our stores and across our offices, we have all the social distancing rules in place. I think I mentioned when we were kind of chatting before the call that, we've got, just in reception, we've got circles marked out on the floor telling people where to stand. In fact, we've told most of us to don't come in, but it's for even our team members coming in when they're waiting to have their temperature check before they hand sanitize entering the building. Things like every room has medical grade disinfectant hand sanitizer in there now. Rooms have signage on saying this room used to seat 12, it now seats 3. So all those pieces are in place to really just try and instill those principles in our team members in the office. And then the same is in the few stores that we've got open at the moment. Those rules are in place. Our team members have the equipment they need to protect themselves, and also we've messaged that through our website, through mecca.com.au, explain to customers what we're doing to manage through this. I think that the challenge is that it's changing, and so if we relax on what our stage 3 here, and we see a blow up of cases, there's a chance that the easing could then contract again. So I think what we've got to do is just be really clear about what our process is then to go back to that. We've already got teams working, as I said, from home. There's a few of us going in from time to time in the office. I'm talking sort of, probably 10% to 15%-ish across the building. So there's no problem with distance in there. But that's really just as an essential need from time to time. So we're really trying to maintain that and make sure our customers understand that's what we're trying to do. And that includes, even with returns that come back to our warehouse, that there is a quarantine period that they go through and they're fully cleaned and so forth. So
brilliant.
We're trying to think of everything, but what is the everything in this crazy world that we're in at the moment? So I think everybody's leading in and trying to do their best.
Brilliant. Look, we're almost out of time. I've got one personal question I'd love for you both to share with us. How are you coping? What's your top tip for the audience of actually getting through this time?
Mark and I were joking, going train in the morning, drink in the evening. I think the COVID kilos have come on a little bit. You know, I noticed on my camera, this camera, there's a bit of extra cheekage. So I need to kind of reset that and probably do just a little bit more. But I think trying to create routine and some normality. And we were saying, you've lost the kids' school run. You know, you've lost regular going into the office. You've lost the regular gym sessions you might do. Try and figure out what your new normal is through this. You know, if it's training in the garden with your kids, which I'm trying to do, through to trying to run, then, you know, try and figure that out. Mark, what's your view?
I've been good at one of the two things that you mentioned. I'll let you figure out which one that is. I mean, personally, I've really struggled delineating between weekday and weekend. And I know for many people, you know, working from home in a lot of instances has actually meant that they're working longer and harder because there isn't that natural disconnect between home and work environments. I definitely have. I've definitely been victim to that. I mean, I reflect personally to say, you know, to think that, you know, this is the hardest that I've ever worked in my whole life. And I've been an entrepreneur. I've, you know, started and built businesses, and I never thought, you know, I thought those days were behind me. But I would say that it's also been probably the most rewarding period in my career as well. I think watching how the team has really kind of rallied together and done some pretty extraordinary things. Yeah. I'm you know, immensely proud of their achievements over this period of time. And I think for the wider business, just in very difficult circumstances, always, you know, not always making the right decisions or the best decisions, but just how everyone's rallied together and overcome those things, you know, adapted and accelerated beyond, you know, what we're all dealing with. There is an immense sense of pride, which probably helps with the coping mechanism, I suppose, because, you know, when you are working full tilt for very long periods of time, you know, emotionally, physically, it is a drain. But what you're uplifted by is watching, you know, extraordinary team members do some pretty extraordinary things with next to nothing. And I think that's definitely fueled us all, I think, through this period of time.
It certainly instilled a real startup mentality back in the business of any kind of scale, I feel. And it's rallied the teams together, you know, and I've seen that across the board. So look, we're out of time. I thank you so much to both of you for sharing your experience with us. I have so many takeaways, and I'm sure the audience feels the same. Some of my favorite things was actually, you know, reconsidering some of the traditional channels for your marketing or other things. Doesn't all have to be new, and it could still bring some really good results. But also Stuart's kind of focus on our team's health and safety, but also their mental well-being, I think is a really key point that I've taken away from today. And, you know, in some ways, business actually mirrors biology. And as Darwin once said, those who survive are not the strongest and not the most intelligent, but those who are the most adaptable to change. So thank you both for being change agents and leading the way. It was incredibly valuable, and I really appreciate you both taking the time to provide these insights and share them with the broader community as we hope everybody gradually gets back on their feet. So that's a wrap. Thank you to the wonderful people behind the scenes who organized the event, and enjoy the rest of your day and stay safe.